Welcome back to John Sadler's Auto Repair. Today we're doing the follow-up on the Toyota, and as you remember before, the fuel pressure was jumping around quite a bit, so I put a new fuel pump in over the weekend. Now I'm going to start it up and show you where the fuel gauge is. Now if you remember before in the last video, the fuel pressure was jumping from 45 down to 30, sometimes even a little bit lower, but the needle was consistently bobbling around. So now as you can see, the needle is very stable at 45, 46, 47 psi. It doesn't vary from that. It stays nice and stable. So that's what you're looking for when you're doing a fuel pressure test. You want the right fuel pressure and you want the needle to be stable, not jumping around like that. So now we'll shut it off. And what we did is we used Toyota parts when we did this. We have a Toyota fuel pump, as you can see by the box there, and we replaced the pump. And this is a screen on the bottom of the pump that fits down on the bottom of the fuel tank to where it picks up from the tank. And then instead of having an inline fuel filter on this particular model, it has a filter built into the modular housing. So what this does is it sets up inside like this, and then it has the screen that plugs on the bottom of that. Then there's a whole housing that this goes inside of. It's called a modular unit, and it has a sending unit bolted to the side of it. And so what we did is just change the internal parts. But normally the fuel filter would be on the frame rail. And one thing we noticed is this is all sealed, but this unit was quite a bit physically heavier than the unit that we took off. Okay, so that takes care of our fuel problem, the drivability, the loss of power, the needle jumping around, the customer's concern about low power, the stall. And now we have a separate concern when he talked about he went to start it and then he turned the key and nothing would happen. So we did some research. We started off with the fuses and the relays, and we found in the relay box, it shows us a picture here, and here's the starter relay, then here's the magnetic clutch for the AC. And the one for the starter is this kind of purple-blue color, and that was over here where the AC one was. And the AC one was where the start one was. I don't know why that was, but as you can see, they're specifically color-coded. They have two different part numbers. It's not supposed to be like that. So we corrected that issue. Then we had the issue actually happen to us when we turned the key and nothing happened. So remember before, we were hooked in by the back of the ignition switch. And before, we had a wiring diagram here. On the back of the ignition switch, we had power coming in to the computer from the ignition switch. And so then we had only 5 volts going out to the neutral safety switch and then to the starter, and it should be between 9 and 14 volts. So what we found out, here it is here, 9 to 14 volts. So what we found out is there's a signal wire that goes up here at the top of the ECM, and that tells the computer that the engine's cranking over. So we went to test that. And on this particular vehicle, the ECM is below the glove box, back in this corner here. And the pin we were testing, the starter crank signal, to see if it's getting a signal, was this yellow-black wire, the second terminal on the top up here. As soon as I pushed a test pin into that terminal, then the engine started cranking over. That's not supposed to happen. So we removed the ECM connectors, and we sprayed electrical contact cleaner in all these sockets, and then also on the circuit side, on the PCM side or ECM side, we sprayed that and cleaned it off with computer air because it's nice, clean, dry air. The shop air can actually make it worse because it's got oil and whatever other, something that's in there that's not good for the electrical contacts. Then we removed the circuit board, and we saw in the back of the circuit board there was one little area where there's a little bit of buildup, so we weren't too happy about that. So we cleaned that off, and then we resealed the back of the circuit board with some clear lacquer, put it all back together again, did the same test that we did before, and now when we push a test pin in there to check for voltage, the motor does not crank over. So the concern with that was either a bad connection or that little bit of corrosion. We've duplicated the symptom that when it first happened, so we've duplicated each time, and now each time it does not do that problem again. It may have something else wrong in the future, but right now that problem is corrected. You've got to remember that there's so many connections on that ECM. All it takes is a little bit. He lives down by the beach, and before that, this vehicle was on the East Coast, so it just takes a little bit of corrosion to get inside there that you can't even see, that you have to use the contact cleaner and then the computer air to clean. Then we reassembled, and that took care of the problem. Now the vehicle runs good, drives good, has great power. The customer is happy. We can go back out to the front here again. Now we're going to reassemble the covers on the front of the motor and double check all his fluids for him to make sure those are in good shape. And like I said before, the other repair facility he went to, they changed his battery and his starter. The next day the problem happened again. He's still left there with a loss of power, so they put his old starter back in. We did a current draw test on the starter. The starter's drawing between 100 and 150 amps. That's pretty normal for most starters. So at this point, we're not going to be too concerned about replacing the starter. The other shop did put his original starter back in for him, per his request, because there didn't appear to be anything wrong with it. So now we're going to reassemble everything on this. We'll give it back to the customer. The vehicle drives better, it starts better. The part where it didn't crank over actually happened in our repair facility, so we could make that happen by pushing on that pin for the start signal wire. We cleaned out the connections, we plugged everything back in again. Now everything's working properly. So please, before you start changing ECMs and changing whole units of things, please check the connections, clean the connections, then retest, because you can save your customer a lot of money and you can take things in a timely order so you can actually verify what happened to the vehicle, give the vehicle back, you have great confidence the vehicle's not going to break down on the customer again. If by chance it does break down at a later date, then we know exactly what pin to test, exactly what signal to check. If we have an issue there again, then we can replace the ECM. So thank you very much and have a nice day.